Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today I'm bringing you an after-action report on a diplomacy game I played as a member of a team. This was what's called Espionage Diplomacy, a version of diplomacy in which each country is run by 3 players, and out of the total of 21 players, 7 of them are spies who are secretly working for the benefit of a different country from the one they are stationed in. The way the game was structured, 2 of us would become ambassadors, the country's external mouthpieces, and 1 of us would be the Minister of Defense in charge of issuing orders, but unable to communicate with foreign powers. The Minister of Defense was to be chosen by an election held at the beginning of each year. The game began with me and 2 other players controlling England. Not one of my favorite powers to manage, but I hoped that my luck might be a little different given that there were 2 partners working with me. My colleagues were Yodaman and Cheez-It, and we agreed that Yodaman would be the first Minister of Defense, while Cheez-It and I would be our country's initial ambassadors. I wasn't a spy, by the way. Spies were informed as to who they were at the very beginning of the game. So in spring 1901, I communicated with German Ambassador Rat, who was pretty cagey about their opening, and I was likewise a little bit vague about our plans. Austrian Ambassador A Fluffy Fruit was pretty friendly without saying anything definite either. French Ambassador Ulster said that they planned to support an army into Burgundy, which was rather encouraging. But he admitted they weren't ready to really commit for sure against Germany. Italian Ambassador Bumble and I spoke, but it wasn't really about working together. Instead, we talked about the wrinkle in the game of spies existing. We both agreed that we planned to act as if there were no spies until proven otherwise, because frankly, even most spies would have to act as if they were not spies most of the time in order to maintain credibility within their host countries. Russian Ambassador Kidunu and I spoke, and we agreed that we might work together against Germany. Russian Ambassador Ice Cream Guy suggested openness to the same thing, which made me think we might have a solid combination of forces against the Germans, who weren't doing as good a job of communicating from what I understand as we in England were. With the processing of 1901 orders, we moved North Sea, Norwegian Sea, and Edinburgh, while France does the supported move into Brest we expected, and Germany moved to Denmark, Holland, and Ruhr. In the southeast, everything is pretty typical except that Italy enters Tyrolia. It looks like a probable juggernaut to me without much background intel on that region's activity. One downside to having 2 ambassadors that becomes apparent pretty quickly is that although Cheez-It and I are coordinating so that we try to present a united front to the world, other countries' representatives are giving out contradictory information, which creates a muddled mess for us as we plan out orders going into fall 1901. Still, things go well. At first. French Ambassador Ulster told me that the French would be okay with a convoy to Belgium, after some extensive discussion about that, and ultimately France actually does let us into Belgium and supported Italy into Munich as well, which was very encouraging for us. France did express concern that Italy wanted to keep Munich long-term, though, which was a potential problem for them. I also thought this was a bad priority for Italy to set, because Munich is pretty indefensible for them. This leaves England in control of Norway and Belgium, which makes me tentatively happy. After 1901 moves processed, Ulster and I discussed French and English builds, and France was insistent on building a fleet in Brest, which was annoying and ominous. In the build phase, my colleagues and I agree to attack France, whose contradictory diplomacy is giving us untrustworthy vibes. Italy is apparently eager to work with us in this, or in whatever we want to do, I suppose, which gives me all the encouragement I need. Unfortunately, although we make our anti-French builds, Russia builds a North Coast fleet in St. Petersburg. One of the Russian ambassadors, Ice Cream Guy, claimed to believe their Minister of Defense was a spy, but it came across as a poor excuse for Russian moves rather than a sincere theory, and I told him that if that was the case, Russia should denounce the spy. Denouncing a spy was a mechanic for this game that meant exactly what it sounded like. 2 players from a country could vote to denounce the 3rd player, essentially disavowing that player's communications or orders. This would not disempower that player at all, it would just show distrust. There were a couple of denouncements in this game, but none of them actually mattered for very long, so I'm not going to mention it further. In spring 1902, French Ambassador Ulster and I discussed a Western Triple, which would be a downgrade from an alliance against Germany from my perspective, but still a very good thing for England, if it was sincere, though that was dubious. We tried to negotiate the return of Munich from Italy to Germany in exchange for a German alliance against France, but Germany essentially refused to take Munich and went for Belgium instead, taking that from us. Italy attacked France as planned, but we were essentially helpless to assist, and Germany wasn't helping either. Russia clearly moved against us, going into Barents Sea and backfilling St. Pete so that they would have overwhelming force relative to Norway. I negotiated with Ambassador Rat of Germany after orders processed, but it wasn't very productive, because Rat tried to explain the recent anti-English actions on his nation's part as being due to a possible spy within Germany, which I thought was probably untrue. In the retreat phase, we had to destroy our unit in Belgium, which had no place to retreat to. In fall 1902, Russia takes Norway as expected, and just like that, we're down to only our home centers. In the southeast corner, Turkey is completely cornered by Austria and Russia, which will just empower Russia to attack us further, and give Austria the ability to attack our main ally thus far, Italy. The situation looks grim. In the build phase, Germany gets a new fleet as well as a new army, despite the fact that their homeland is surrounded by armies from other countries that could attack Munich at any moment. And now Munich is defended only by that single army. In spring 1903, I again tried to negotiate with Ambassador Rat of Germany, but he was trying to talk his way into North Sea as a part of working with us against France and Russia, which was a non-starter for me, like much of what Rat had tried to argue before. At the same time, German Ambassador Dien was trying to get a Western Triple formed, which seemed somewhat contradictory to Rat's proposals. In short, Germany was a mess. I wouldn't have been surprised if their country had 2 spies. As orders process, England essentially does nothing to my mild frustration, while Russia walks into Norwegian unsupported and unopposed by us. France couldn't move much, with Italy attacking them still. Germany moved a unit into Denmark, but otherwise did very little. Russia and Austria stamped down on Turkey from 2 directions and basically crushed the Turks. With the fall, Russia, Austria, and Italy finished Turkey off, finally. Russia also convoys an army onto the English island, so we seemed to be basically screwed at that point. Austria and Italy both built armies, while Russia and Germany built fleets, which didn't seem especially positive, except that at least the Russian fleet was in the south coast of St. Pete, which meant it could perhaps be used against Germany at least. With the beginning of 1904, I requested that I be made the Minister of Defense, because I didn't consider my diplomacy in the ambassador role was helping much, and I think of myself as pretty good at fighting defensive wars, because I think I do well predicting other people's actions and countering them much of the time. We'll see if I'm actually any good at that. I will remain in this role for the remainder of the game. Before I left my ambassador role, Ambassador Rat directly asked me which of my colleagues in England was least likely to be a spy, and I said that I thought Cheez-It was probably not a spy, while I couldn't really be sure about Yoda Man either way. In spring 1904, my ambassadors informed me that they were negotiating to get Russia off of the island. That seemed like a pipe dream to me, but I was happy to have them working toward that goal, while I would pursue the same objective with our military. I ordered my units to move to Liverpool, Edinburgh, and North Sea, to make sure we could retake Edinburgh after the probable Russian move there. In fall, I ordered a fleet into Belgium to try and retake that centre, which was happily successful. Now Russia was off our back, turned fully on Germany, Austria and Italy were skirmishing, France did a whole lot of nothing. In the build phase, I built a London fleet. In spring 1905, we worked with Russia and France against Germany, convoying into Holland. In fall, I defended against the possibility of Russia moving into Edinburgh again, because Russia hadn't vacated Norwegian Sea for some reason. France and Russia moved in ways that were at least nominally friendly to us this season as well. There seems to have been an error in the map here, since my fleet somehow ends up not moving out of North Sea into Edinburgh, and in the build phase I actually put a new fleet in Edinburgh. This is the downside of human beings processing orders rather than automating it. But it could have been much worse than it was in this game. There were only a handful of mistakes, and generally they were quickly corrected. In spring 1906, I tried to stab France by shifting all of our units toward him and preparing to go after Brest and possibly other French centers. Unfortunately, Russia chose this moment to stab us and take North Sea. I ordered the North Sea unit to retreat to London, but it shouldn't have actually been there in the first place because I had ordered North Sea to Belgium rather than ordering Holland to Belgium, so the GM corrected that error. In fall, we take Brest from France, which was fun, but Russia also convoys an army onto our island again, although he does not yet take a center. Elsewhere, we successfully defend from France's attack on Belgium, while Austria continues to attack Italy. In the build, I get us an army in Liverpool, and thanks to my attack on Brest, I'm confident we'll be able to counter Russia's army on our island. Unfortunately, in spring 1907, I make some pretty significant mistakes. The main one is that I don't use the English Channel to defend London, even though I'm trying to use other units to dislodge Russia from where it is on our island, and that oversight allows Russia to retreat into London. Russia also goes into Edinburgh, which is a headache. I think it was at this point that someone on the English team actually accused me of being a Russian spy, which would be funny if it didn't sound so reasonable. I have to explain that no, I'm not a traitor, I'm just screwing up. Elsewhere, Austria takes Munich from France, which is just funny. The map seems to be falling under the sway of an Austro-Russian alliance, but the two of them are also devoting several units to either trying to attack each other or engaging in coordinated bounces this season. It's apparent in retrospect that this is Russia turning on Austria. In fall 1907, I retake Edinburgh. Not much else noteworthy happens. However, since I lost London through my boneheaded moves, I have to disband the Brest unit. In spring 1908, I retake North Sea, resulting in Russia retreating that unit onto our island as well. From there, Russia defends London, which I know I can't take given a devoted Russian defense, so I gamble on Norway being defended and I take that instead. The end of 1908, the map looks like this, a situation in which England holds 6 centres, but is missing one home centre and could lose at least one centre to France at any moment. With spring 1909, I make bad gambles against Russia and lose Liverpool and Edinburgh while retaking London. France walks into Belgium, which is a pity. I thought we had some kind of understanding with them, although I'm increasingly disconnected from our diplomacy since I'm the Minister of Defence, and since communication between the English players is decreasing over time as people lose interest in the game. In fall 1909, I decide it would be fun to try and punish Russia for all that they've done to us by walking into St. Petersburg. Let them see what losing a home centre feels like. Amusingly, this is actually successful, and we now control a Russian home centre. I feel like I'm waging a relatively successful guerrilla war. Unfortunately, Russia now has an Austrian home centre, which suggests a new source of growth for them, needed since their progress against us is a consistent pattern of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. In spring 1910, I reposition to try and take Edinburgh back. So I move St. Petersburg to Norway, I retake North Sea, while Russia moves into English Channel. It looks like another round of musical chairs to decide who will control a number of disputed English and Russian centres. Unfortunately, after spring 1910 was over, there was a motion to concede the game to Russia, which I believed and still believe and will probably always believe was highly premature. However, the GM only required 4 out of the surviving 6 players to agree that the game should be conceded, which was not a difficult standard to clear since Russia counted as one of the 4, and many of the players were simply tired of playing. The game ended with this map, and Russia was the official winner, even though Russia had only 9 centres, had not been advancing particularly quickly, and could have only gained 3 or 4 centres that year at most, even if Austria threw centres at them. Part of the problem was that it became clear at this point that the Austrian Minister of Defence was a spy for Russia, so Austria throwing centres to them was an option. However, the position was still recoverable, in my opinion, if they simply voted the spy out at the end of the year, which they surely would have done. They would have been fighting in a bad position, but if everyone united against Russia, we would have won. The one Russian spy had been found out at this point, and the Russian players weren't tactically spectacular. Russia also had a spy, Ice Cream Guy, who was supposedly working for France, although there wasn't much success there in my opinion. France had a spy within their country, but that spy was working for Turkey, who was killed off. Turkey had 2 spies, but they became irrelevant after Turkey was killed off. Italy had a spy working for us, which is why they were such a staunch ally for pretty much the entire game. Germany was the only power who didn't have any spies, which made their chaotic moves and decisions pretty inexplicable. And in the end, it turned out that the spy within England was Yoda Man, and he was spying for Germany. I honestly don't think it made much of a difference that he was the spy, because we never had much opportunity to attack Germany in any case, since both France and Russia were hostile to us from early on. There was a moment early on when we were talking about attacking Germany or France, and Yoda Man expressed that we should attack France, but that was also right after France decided to build Fleet Brest and Army Paris in 1901, so the whole English team already wanted to attack France. Other than that, Yoda Man was the Minister of Defence in the early game, so he didn't have much time to conspire with anyone, and his order choices were pretty favourable for England despite his secret allegiance, and once Yoda Man became an ambassador, he didn't communicate that much with the group, or with foreign powers to the best of my knowledge. The game generally seems to have become a lot quieter once it was really going, and by the time when I rotated into being the Minister of Defence, I hadn't been doing that much chatting either. I think the main reason why Yoda Man didn't get to accomplish that much as a spy, though, was that the German team didn't manage to do very well and create an opportunity for Yoda Man to throw them some centers. That exposes one of the flaws of this quasi-variant, which is that if you are a spy, There are a lot of situations in which you won't be able to do much of anything that could be useful to your home country, unless you're very creative. I think if I were to create a larger scale version of this variant, I might add one additional spy for each country, and also a position of spy master within each country, that would manage that country's spies and be aware of their identities. There seems to me to be a lot you can do with the concept of spies, and this game only really scratched the surface for me. I found it a bit unsatisfying, because the ending was premature, the mechanic for ending the game didn't require a unanimous decision to select a winner, and the other players were pretty disengaged by the end. Which again, I think is part of why it ended at the time it did. I also didn't like that it ended so close to my big mistake, but that's how things happen sometimes. I hope you enjoyed this after-action report. If so, please thank the supporters who helped to make these videos possible, whose names now appear on screen. And if you liked, please like and comment. Until next time, Florida Man, out.